Welcome, everybody. Merry Christmas. We have a special, very special bonus episode for you in this Christmas day. Actually, the whole Christmas week. This year, we wanted to reflect on a few topics that are important for us as Scrum Masters, as Agile coaches, and of course, as Agile practitioners in general. So let's dive into it. What's today about? Listen in. So today's episode is about the product owner role. The product owner role is one of the critical roles in Scrum. And I'd say even that when the PO role is not working well in a team, the team will probably fail or at least have a very tough time succeeding. And this is important because even when the Scrum Master is great, if the product owner role is not working well in that team, the team will have serious problems. Now, before we start this episode, let me share with you that we will be organizing a product owner summit here on the podcast. And if you're interested in being a volunteer at this summit, you can send us a message at podcast@oikosofi.com. The email will also be on the show notes, and we'll get some sessions going in the beginning of the year to make sure that we get a great team set up for the product owner summit. We will get in touch with you after the new year. So send us your reason to participate in this Product Owner Summit at podcast@oikosofi.com. So why is the product owner so critical? Well, first of all, we need to understand a little bit about the context. The product owner role is a very solitary role. The original Scrum guide even called the product owner the single ringable neck. In other words, the person to blame if the product would not succeed or the team would not deliver. And of course, many companies, on top of this, resorted to staffing the product owner role with project managers. The same was done with Scrum Masters, with the Scrum Master role, to some extent. But of course, people with project management background are not necessarily very collaborative, and probably not even the most product-oriented people, which is a big trend these days in the Agile community, the product orientation. So the product owner role became kind of one would call it maybe even a backlog secretary, right? Many organizations still act as if the product owner's main responsibility is to have a backlog ready for the team, a high quality set of the user stories ready for the team. Now, if we take this seriously, and there's a team will probably have, I don't know, like 2, 3, 4, 5 people, maybe even up to 7, 8, 9 people working from that backlog. This means that the product owner will be taken away from their core responsibility, which is looking at the product, looking at the customer, and looking at the business. The backlog maintenance is detail-oriented work, right? We need to make sure that everything is documented properly, that things are updated and tracked so that when requirements change, we know that they have changed. And if that's the role that the product owner needs to take, the backlog maintainer, then the product owner would need some very high attention to detail. But of course, their main responsibility is towards the customers and business stakeholders. So this is the first big paradox of the product owner role as implemented in practice in many organizations today. The product owner role is a business role that is often implemented as a detail-oriented requirements management role. And of course, that is a big paradox because when you get people who are more detail oriented and need to focus on the customer, they will not excel at focusing on the customer, even though they might have a perfect backlog. And vice versa, if you have a person that is not at all detail oriented, they'll probably have a hard time keeping the backlog at the right level of quality, even if they have a good relationship with customers. They might not even be able to bring all of the information from the customers to the team because they're not detail oriented. If on top of that you put the pressure that is on the product owner's shoulders, you start to see that this is not at all an easy role. The product owner often gets criticized, gets flack from the team for not having the requirements written quote unquote properly, right? The user stories with all the details, acceptance criteria, and so on. But I also get flack from the stakeholders, the business stakeholders, for not providing, for example, a good enough roadmap, which, by the way, having a great roadmap is a completely different problem to having a good backlog. And they'll also get criticized by the customers for not implementing the features that they've asked for, or not even responding quickly enough to maybe questions about future features or new features that they might need. Usually these requests come from sales and support. So this puts the product owner in a very awkward position of serving three completely different types of stakeholders. I call these constituencies, serving three completely different constituencies. And even though they are serving three completely different constituencies, they are still responsible for the business success of the product. The product owner serves the team, the business stakeholders, including potentially other teams as well, and the customers. And these three constituencies require different approaches, different types of work, different personalities, even one could say. So let's start with the first one, which is working with the team. For us as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, this is probably where we spend most of our time, where we spend most of our focus when working with product owners, which is improving their work with the team. So when it comes to the team, the PO serves the team by providing direction, by providing feedback, guidance. But the product owner does not only serve the team, we need to recognize that the team also needs to serve the product owner. For example, the product owner needs help from the team to know what's possible technology-wise. It's not often that the product owner is both a business expert and a technology expert. So when working with the team, the product owner will need support in finding out what's possible technology-wise, and also in finding out what's the minimum we can deliver to solve a certain business or customer problem. We can expect the product owner to understand, or at least we should expect the product owner to understand what's the business problem or the customer problem, but we can't always expect the product owner to have all the technical knowledge to come up with a solution, right? The feature requirements for that problem. So for me, the first and most important responsibility of the Scrum Masters who want to help their product owner is to create a good collaboration between product owner and the team in exploring possible solutions. And when I mean possible solutions, I want to emphasize it's always more than one solution. We need to look at, for example, different optimization aspects. Are we optimizing for usability, for speed of use, for performance, for time to market? What are we optimizing for? And when we ask these questions, it's very important for both the PO and the team when exploring these different solutions. For example, if we ask, okay, so I hear you're thinking of implementing it this way. Have we considered performance if we implement this feature this way? Do we, for example, put an unnecessary load on the backend if we implement the feature that way? Or have we considered usability? Or is this feature only for expert users for which perhaps the usability is not a major concern? Asking these questions is very important to help product owner and the teams explore different solutions. And here, when I talk about exploring different solutions, the principle to have in mind is that there's always many solutions to solve problems that customers face, and the product owner and the team need to collaborate to find out which of these many solutions best optimizes for the goals we have. So that's the first constituency, and I gave just a few examples of what it means to help a product owner working with a team. But there's also other stakeholders. And if we consider especially sales and marketing, for example, the team is only one of the stakeholders that the PO works with. We also need the PO to work with the business side. Sales, marketing, management, support, after sales, pre-sales teams, you name it. Here, in this constituency, the product owner's responsibility is to understand their goals, to understand each of these stakeholders' goals in the context of their product that they are product owners for. For example, maybe the goal is to increase sales or to increase lead acquisition. Or maybe it is to reduce the cloud service costs, like AWS, for example, which will be driven, of course, this cost reduction will probably be driven by the finance department. So we may need to establish relationships with the finance department and the product owner in order to be able to explore what are the best solutions. The team is not well placed to even know, let alone understand, multiple stakeholders' goals. So the product owner becomes this critical, central role in bringing the knowledge that exists outside the team, in the rest of the business, to the team so that the team can implement what they need to implement. So the product owner may need to interview, to talk, to present, to collect feedback. And when we get feedback on what these stakeholders need, many stakeholders, we then need to understand what are the trade-offs, right? Often the solutions we can implement will not be able to cover all of the possible scenarios, all of the possible trade-offs that the product owner would have. So we need to think about, okay, so what are we optimizing for and what kind of feedback we need in order to make decisions regarding trade-offs. So for example, we may need to increase slightly the cloud hosting costs in order to be able to have the performance that is needed, which is something that marketing and sales may be asking for. And this work of multiple working with multiple stakeholders, helping them negotiate, come to a conclusion as to what's the best solution, is something that the team can't do easily. So the product owner becomes kind of a key bridging role to the rest of the organization. And this means for us as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches that if we are able, us and the team, to help the product owner with tasks like maintaining the backlog, then the product owner will have more time, more availability, mental and otherwise, to do more of this bridging work, to collect the feedback and to interview and define goals by talking to the rest of the organization. As Scrum Masters, we must keep our eye on the quality and timing of these interactions between the PO and other business stakeholders. And if those are not happening, we need to work with the PO to create a way in which they become a normal part of how the PO works, right? Like these interactions with other business stakeholders. Finally, the last constituency for the product owner is the customer. Now, we need to learn to involve the customer, but in a productive way, right? So going to the customer is not just asking customers random questions. It's not just doing usability tests. It's a lot more, right? So the interaction with customers is critical for product owners. And as Scrum Masters, if we observe that these interactions are not happening, that should be a big red light for us. We need to talk to the PO and figure out what is necessary for them to be able to talk to customers. Sometimes it might be that they're just too busy with the backlog and they can't talk with customers, so we need to help them with that. This interaction with customer is so much more important because even though we might think so, the team members are not the customer. The team members know the product very well, and the team members don't have the business understanding or even the customer goal understanding in order to be able to define functionality. So we need the product owner to bring that information to the team. Now, how this works, how the product owner goes out and gets information from the customer into the team could be, customer research. It could be just customer interviews done together, for example, with a user experience group or with an agency that organizes usability tests and customer interviews. Whatever that is, the product owner will have a pivotal role in establishing those relationships, either with the UX group, an agency, or the customers directly, so that they can gather, filter, and present the customer information to the team, right? What we hear from the customer, we then need to filter it, excuse me, we need to consolidate it, and we need to present it to the team. So it's obviously, and we've talked about this, it's obviously very important for the PO to bring customer understanding to the team and then devise solutions together with the team. But these problems require this level of high quality interaction with the customers. And this is a second bridging role that the product owners need to play. As Scrum Masters, we must always be aware, is it happening? And if not, how can I help the product owner to find ways to make that customer interaction happen? It is actually often easier than you think because sometimes product owners will say, but it's so hard to talk to customers. So I was once at uh, talking to a coach at a ride sharing company, and the coach was sharing with me how hard it is to talk to customers. So I asked them, all right, but so you probably have customers of yours outside the office area. They were kind of in the city center, outside the office area requesting rides, right? And the answer, yes, we do. We have customers requesting rides. So I asked, so could you offer something to these customers? For example, a free ride in exchange for a few minutes of their time? And working with the coach, we quickly found that there are concrete, specific ways in which the product owner, now it could be the whole team, but the product owner specifically could interact with customers just outside the office where they work, right? It wasn't even something that was very complicated. But sometimes we are blocked. We don't let ourselves think about these simple solutions. So we talked about these three constituencies: the team, the business stakeholders, and the customer, that the product owner needs to have a good relationship with. But all of these relationships kind of come together in a very important final responsibility for today's episode that we need to discuss. All of the previous responsibilities point in this direction, but what it means is that the PO, the product owner, needs to develop a keen sense of business and understand of the customer in order to be able to fulfill this responsibility, which I call defining value. When the team works on functionality, they often only get the solution defined in the form of user stories, for example, or requirements to work on, right? Like the team just gets that. But in order to be able to do what we always need to do in engineering, so the many trade-offs that we need to do in order to get the solution that is viable and profitable for the business, we need to make these trade-offs. And if we don't have a clear definition of value, then we can't make those trade-offs as a team. So there are these many trade-offs. I'll refer to only a few, give you a few examples. I usually talk about the FURPS with two S's, so that would be functionality, usability, reliability, performance, supportability, and security. And I'll just give a few examples. If we think about functionality, what are the trade-offs that we could have? Well, for example, if we make a particular task easier for the user, we might make another task harder. Maybe some actions need to be more usable, so we need to optimize for those actions. And at that time make a trade-off that makes other actions in the product harder to do. A concrete example would be in order to have a simpler settings screen in our application, we'll probably have less flexibility for the users, right? That's functionality trade-off. Then there's reliability. When we do certain performance optimizations, we might potentially cause reliability issues that can be tackled but require more work. So when we design certain things, we may want to consider the reliability versus performance trade-offs. And finally, one that is very common, a very common trade-off is, for example, if we try to make the login experience easier for the user, we may be causing some, and sometimes unpredictable, security problems, right? That's a trade-off that we need to make. So in order to tackle these trade-offs, we need the PO to be very clear in the definition of value, right? The PO needs to convey to the team what is and what isn't value for the business and, of course, for the customers. So as Scrum Masters, we need to help the product owner in many of these aspects that I just talked about today. And we need to understand that the product owner, without our help, can be a very lonely role, right? There's so many responsibilities The product owner, I usually call the product owner kind of a superhero role because they're expected to do so much. And if you consider this, when the PO feels that they're not getting the help that they need, they'll try to do everything on their own, and of course that means some of these interactions will be lost: interaction with the customer, the business stakeholders, with the team, etc. So my suggestion to you, and as we start this new year as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, work deliberately with your product owner to evaluate where they are regarding these three constituencies and defining value, and together define how do you want to help them, right? Help the product owner to improve. And it needs to be done together. You can't just say, hey, product owner, you need to be better at whatever, writing requirements or interviewing customers. No, we need to do this together. The team needs the PO, but the PO also needs you, the Scrum Master and Agile coach. And of course, they will also at some point need the help of the team. So we're getting to the end, but before we go, what do you think of this perspective on the product owner role? So leave us a comment on the show notes page. Just leave us a comment below the show notes, or send us your thoughts at podcast@oikosofi.com. This was the final bonus Christmas episode for this year. So I wish you all Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and a productive and collaborative year of 2023. Thank you for listening. Now, I'm going to make a very short announcement, and then after that, we have a surprise for you. So thank you for listening to this episode and this week of bonus episodes. Leave us a comment at scrummastertoolbox.org about your thoughts on these topics that we covered today. We want to hear your perspective and also your questions. So you can send us questions. So email us at podcast@oikosofi.com. The email address is in the show notes. For now, thank you for listening. And now the surprise is coming. Right after this, we have, for the first time, the full podcast jingle. 2 minutes of upbeat, feel-good music to get you energized and excited for the day ahead. Here it comes.